Good morning, it's Mr. Barth. Today we're going to talk about adding integers. When you are adding integers, there are two scenarios, and each of those scenarios has its own rule. Okay? The two scenarios are if the integers that you're adding have like signs or unlike signs. Let's deal with like signs first. Like signs, the rule is when you are adding two integers with like signs, you add them, then keep the sign. Let me show you a couple examples of that. One is fairly obvious because you've been doing this for quite some time, or quite a number of years anyway. 3 plus 4. These are two positive numbers, so all you're going to do is add them and keep the sign. Okay, these two numbers are positive, so this answer stays positive. No, you do not have to put the positive sign there if you were going to ask. Another example. -5 plus -7. So let's say you go down 5 floors on an elevator, and then you go down another 7 floors on the elevator. That would be a total of 12 floors, and you have to keep it negative because our rule says add them, 5 plus 7, then keep the sign. So I'm keeping the negative sign from both of these. Okay, I'll give you one more example. -6 plus -12. Let's say it was -6 degrees out, and then the temperature went down 12 degrees. Okay? All right, well, if I'm following my rule, that's 6 plus 12 is 18, and I'm going to keep the sign because they are both the same sign. So negative, they're both negative, so this is going to be -18. And that makes sense because if it's -6 out and it goes down 12 degrees, then it would be -18 degrees out. Okay, now the other scenario is a little trickier. People find it a little tougher to remember, and it's maybe not as obvious. When there are unlike signs, okay, what you are going to do, you're going to follow this rule. You are going to subtract the two numbers, okay, and then keep the sign of the larger absolute value. Okay, let's see what that looks like in action. All right, so if I have 10 plus -3, they are unlike signs. I have one positive, one negative number. I'm going to subtract them. 10 minus 3 is 7, and I'm going to keep the sign of the larger absolute value. This one has a larger absolute value. The absolute value of 10 is 10. The absolute value of -3 is 3. So this has the larger absolute value. So this one is the one that dominates. Okay, if you want to think of this as a common sense or common situation, let's say you went up 10 stairs and then down 3. Okay, you can see the subtraction coming into play there. Okay, up 10, down 3, I end up 7 above where I started. Okay, here's another one. -6 plus 5. All right, so I have two unlike signs. One's negative, one's positive. I'm going to subtract the two. 6 minus 5 is 1. And to determine what the sign is, I use the one with a larger absolute value. In this case, the -6 has a larger absolute value. Absolute value of -6 is 6. Absolute value of 5 is 5. So this answer is going to end up being negative. Okay, here's another one. -7 plus 13. Okay, so I look at the two. They have unlike signs. I'm going to subtract them. In this case, I have to go 13 minus 7. 13 minus 7 is 6. And I'm going to keep the sign of the larger absolute value. That's 13. So this is going to be a +6. And I leave it. All right. Now, one well, an example of, say this as a word problem, it's -7 degrees out, and then the temperature goes up 13. Okay? And if you thought about it logically, that would make sense. Going from -7, if you went up 13, you would be at 6 degrees. All right. One example that I need to mention is this one. -8 plus 8. All right, they have unlike signs, so I'm going to subtract them. 8 minus 8 is 0, and I have to use the sign from the larger absolute value. Well, they have the same absolute value. Okay, so, and this is a little bit of a silly instance because I can't put -0. There's no such thing as -0. 0 doesn't have a sign. It's neither positive or negative, so I just leave it as 0. Now, these two numbers are called additive inverses. The reason I bring this up is this is gonna come up time and time again. We're going to use it later when we're doing some algebra. Additive inverses are two numbers that have a sum of 0. In other words, they add up to 0. And other examples of additive inverses would be like -22 plus 22, or -5 plus 5, any of those. And basically, they're opposites. When opposites add, they add up to 0. Okay, now I'm going to give you 3 example problems, and then you can pause the video and do them by yourself. The 3 problems I'm going to give you are 14 plus -12, 6 plus -11, and -9 plus -8. Pause the video now. Okay, I hope you used the rules. I'm going to follow along with the rules here. Okay, and give myself enough room here. All right, 14 plus -12. Well, my rules say if my signs are different or I have unlike signs, I'm going to subtract and then keep the sign of the larger. So I'm going to subtract 14 minus 12 is 2, and I'm going to keep the sign of the larger absolute value. That's this one. So this is going to stay positive. 2 is my answer. Okay, and this is, let's say you had $14 in your bank account, and then you made a $12 withdrawal. Okay, so this is a positive number, that's how much is in there, and a withdrawal is when you take money out of the account. So that would end up being, there would be $2 left in your account. All right, so let's go on to this next one. 6 plus -11. Again, I have unlike signs, so I'm going to subtract and keep the sign of the larger absolute value. That's what our rule says. Subtract and keep the sign of the larger absolute value. So I'm going to subtract 11 minus 6 is 5, and this one has a larger absolute value, so I'm going to make this -5. Okay, and let's say maybe a word problem example with this. Let's say you have 2 plays in football. The first play you gain 6, that would be a positive 6, and then you lose 11. Okay, that would be a total of -5 yards. Okay, in other words, you went 5 yards backwards after these 2 plays. All right, last one. This is -9 plus -8. Okay, so in this case, this is a different rule than these two. In this case, they have like signs, so I'm going to add them and keep the sign. 9 plus 8 is 17, and I'm going to keep the sign. That's negative. So let's say you went to the store and you spent $9. That's the negative. So in other words, you got rid of $9. And then you spent another $8. That's the same as spending $17. All right. Thank you for watching. Please rewatch the video if you didn't catch it all.